Se-roi and his Danbam bar staff prepare for business, and Se-roi summons them for their pre-open ritual. The chef, Ma Hyuni, asks if they can skip it this time, but hall staff Choi Sung-kwon scolds her to follow orders. They stand together and stretch to the national warm-up song. At a high school, a bully harasses a classmate and takes a sleeping student's pin to write on the victim's head. The sleeping student, Yi-seo, and then pans over to the scene of the harassment. She posts the video on her social media, and it goes viral. Yi-seo scrolls happily through her comments, and we see it to Yi-seo, a social media star and blogger who transferred from New York last year, and is considered a genius with her IQ of 162. The classmate, Jang's voice yells for Yi-seo in her neighborhood, who's the wealthy mother of the bully that Yi-seo exposed on her social media. The mother slaps Yi-seo and berates her for incriminating her daughter. Then, Yi-seo turns, rubs her slapped cheek, and starts laughing. She implies blame on the mother's poor parenting, and when the mother tries to push her, Yi-seo throws the mother's hand away. Yi-seo approaches the mother and threatens to share the video with Roi. He tries to de-escalate the situation, but Yi-seo uses that window to slap the mother. Everyone looks shocked, and Yi-seo nonchalantly calls it a counterattack. Yi-seo tells Se-roi to mind his own business and goes on her way. Yi-seo before she boards her taxi. Se-roi catches the mother, erupts in anger and raises her hand to strike Yi-seo again. Then, someone intervenes and stops the mother. It's Se-roi. He tries to de-escalate the situation, but Yi-seo uses that window to slap the mother. Everyone looks shocked, and Yi-seo nonchalantly calls it a counterattack. Yi-seo tells Se-roi to mind his own business and goes on her way. Se-roi catches Yi-seo before she boards her taxi, and he scolds her for hitting an elder. Her voice trembling, Yi-seo claims that her father died because of that lady, and that hits home for Se-roi. He lets her go, and Yi-seo rolls down the window of the taxi to admit her lie. She sticks her tongue out at him before the car drives off, and Se-roi looks annoyed. Irritated by the interaction with Yi-seo, Chef Hyuni assumes it's because they have no customers, but he explains that he met a psycho earlier. At school, Yi-seo gets scolded for hitting an elder. She asks why that's not okay. She wonders aloud if she needs to tolerate an unfair beating because the woman is an elder and the wife of their district head. Her homeroom teacher ushers her out of the office. At Jang-ga HQ, Gunwon presents his idea for a Jang-ga dating app to draw more people to their low-performing Itaewon bar. And Suwa explains that the Hongdae and Kondae Jang-ga bars happen to be popular for hookups because of their location, not because it was the company's intention. She thinks that framing the Jang-ga bars as hookup sites would ruin their brand's merit for quality food. Defensive Gunwon reacts angrily, but Minyoung agrees with Suwa. Advertising their bar for hookups seems ridiculous, since that's more on brand with clubs and lounge bars. President Jang agrees with the criticisms and asks Gunwon if he knows the average age of customers in Itaewon. Gunwon doesn't seem to know, so President Jang lectures him on the demographics of Itaewon. Gunwon seems to shrink nervously as his father approaches him with more chastising words. President Jang rips up Gunwon's proposal as he asserts that taste, ambience, and quality are the priorities of their Itaewon customers. He says that they need to win over customers with their food, not with his trash proposal. President Jang reassigns the Itaewon bar management to Suwa, and when Gunwon meekly tries to reclaim his area, President Jang slaps him in front of the whole room. After the meeting, Gunwon asks Suwa if she has a grudge against him, and she responds that his proposal was bound to get rejected anyway. He warns her to pick the right side, since he's in line to inherit the company soon. Suwa asks if he's sure that he's the heir, and she leaves him with her skepticism. President Jang seems to ponder the same issue as he looks at the photo of his two sons, the younger one being the sociopath's follower, Jang Gun-soo. The younger Jang's son looks through his social media and smiles at Yi-seo's posts. In one of her photos, he notices the caption indicating that she's at the Jamsu Bridge. At Danbam, Hyuni's patience runs thin as she repeatedly teaches Sungkwon how to work the register. She yells at him for being an idiot, and Se-roi confirms this as he enters his bar. Hyuni points to a large box that was delivered earlier, and Se-roi says that he ordered this for marketing purposes. They all look inside the box, and his staff looks slightly confused. Gun-soo arrives at the Jamsu Bridge on his scooter and finds Yi-seo. Looking out from the bridge, Yi-seo asks Gun-soo, "Have you ever thought, it would have been better if I wasn't born?" Gun-soo responds that he never has and asks why she would think this. Yi-seo says that everyone dies eventually, so she finds all the studying and effort tiring, and suggests that they go for a ride. Gun-soo has plans to meet a Hyung at a club, and Yi-seo invites herself, despite his objection. Gun-soo feigns reluctance and tells Yi-seo to grab tightly onto his waist. When she wraps his arms around him, he can't help but smile. They ride to Itaewon, and a young boy chases after his basketball on their path. Gun-soo stops abruptly and manages to avoid an accident, but the sudden stop flings Yi-seo into the air. And upon noticing flying Yi-seo, the chestnut runs to catch her as she falls. The chestnut head rolls off, and we that it's Se-roi, who hits his head on the ground but absorbs the impact of Yi-seo's fall. When he sees Yi-seo, he immediately recognizes her, and his concern flips to annoyance. But before he can do anything, his eyes roll to the back of his head, and he passes out. Gun-soo and the surrounding crowd run to him in concern while Yi-seo observes apathetically. President Jang meets with Soo-ah and marvels that 10 years have already passed since they first met. He mentions Roi's Danbam bar in Itaewon near the Jang bar and asks Soo-ah if she knew this. She explains that she didn't mention it to him because it's a bar too small to compete with them. Then, President Jang asks what side she would take if the same situation as 10 years ago unfolded again. With some hesitance, Soo-ah astutely responds that she belongs to the Jang family. After confirming Soo-ah's loyalty, President Jang dismisses his Danbam and trusts Soo-ah to handle her friend. In the emergency room, Gun-soo tells Yi-seo that Roi thankfully didn't have any head injuries, but he collapsed because he was overworked. Roi slowly opens his eyes, jerks away when he realizes that he's at a hospital. Roi looks around for his chestnut suit, and Gun-soo explains that they left it on site because of the emergency. Roi laments that it was expensive, since he had it custom-made, and Gun-soo offers to reimburse him. Putting on his chestnut suit shoes, Roi grabs his bag of flyers, and Gun-soo asks if he runs a shop. Roi explains that he's promoting his Itaewon bar, and Yi-seo comments that he's old-fashioned. Out of genuine curiosity, Roi asks Yi-seo how people promote these days, and she responds that he can post ads online or on social media, though the success of such campaigns depends on how decent the bar is. Roi thanks her for the advice. Gun-soo confirms that he'll pay for the hospital bill and apologizes for the trouble. Roi says that if he's so sorry, he should visit the bar. He hands Gun-soo a flyer with a smile and leaves the hospital. Yi-seo says that she would have claimed much more money for the accident. Gun-soo answers a call from his Hyung, who yells at him for being late. He promises to head over as soon as possible. Yi-seo takes a longer look at the flyer and remembers Roi thanking her for the promotion advice, since he just started. That seems to affect her, but she rips up the flyer and throws it in the air as if she doesn't care. 10 years ago, young Yi-seo nervously waits to receive the baton from her classmate in a relay race. Her mom roots for her on the sidelines, and Yi-seo tries to catch up the girl in front of her, pushes the girl so that she can win the race, and mom stops cheering when she notices this. Yi-seo looks pleased with her win, but the rest of the audience disapproves of her cheating. Mom approaches Yi-seo and unexpectedly praises her great performance. Yi-seo can't believe that mom would endorse this behavior and accuses mom of having an unresolved trauma. Mom says that she won't scold Yi-seo for this because she doesn't want Yi-seo to live an unsatisfactory life like her. At the club, Yi-seo dances freely as she narrates. I understood what you meant and how much you loved me, Mom. I'm an ordinary person, but I was born smart and pretty. Acceptance to a prestigious university, getting hired at a big firm, living a successful life. Plenty of people will fail even if they put in the effort, but I can achieve this if I try. I'll likely be tired until I die, which is why I wish the world would explode instead. Gun-soo and his club Hyung watch Yi-seo dance, and the Hyung asks what Gun-soo's relationship is with her. He responds that they're just friends, so Club Hyung says that he's going to pursue her. Gun-soo stops him and admits that he likes her, and that he just realized this now, so Club Hyung retreats. Yi-seo happily waves at him, and Gun-soo waves back at his crush. In front of Danbam, Hyunhee and Sungkwan try to feed a stray cat, and they bicker about why the cat isn't eating, if it's Hyunhee's poor cooking skills or Sungkwan's face. Roi finds them outside, and asks why they're outside. Obviously, they have no customers. Club Hyung brings Gun-soo and Yi-seo to eat at the Jang bar. Gun-soo sheepishly suggests that they go elsewhere, but Yi-seo, amused by his discomfort, insists that they go inside. The server asks to check Yi-seo's ID before they enter, and he notes that she looks nothing like her ID photo. They manage to enter, but Soo-ah notices them. She tests them by asking if they're all close. She asks Gun-soo what his friend's name is, and he immediately responds that it's Jo Yi-seo. Wrong. Soo-ah shows him the ID that has a different name, and she tells them to come back after they graduate high school. Yi-seo notices another place and points to the familiar bar as an alternative suggestion, Danbam. Inside Danbam, Roi looks at their books and expresses concern about the business. He remembers Yi-seo's recommendations, and he asks his staff if they're active on social media. Sungkwan claims proficiency with an old platform, but their conversation is cut short by customers, familiar faces to Roi. Sungkwan notices that the customers seem too familiar to his boss, but Roi doesn't go into their history. Roi decides to take a gander at the other bars in the neighborhood, and tells Sungkwan to check the customers' IDs before taking their order. When he looks at Yi-seo's ID, he can tell it's fake, but remembers Roi's despondence about their empty bar, and he decides to serve them anyway. Walking around the neighborhood, Roi notices that many bars are packed or even have lines out the door. At Danbam, Gun-soo notes that Yi-seo hasn't taken any pictures yet. He explains to Club Hyung that Yi-seo is a social media star and usually promotes decent shops on her social media, but this place looks too foul. His thoughts are interrupted by Soo-ah, who surprises him with her visit. She explains that she's supporting the Itaewon location for now, so she can visit him often. She links her arm with his, and Se-roi looks a bit flustered by her proximity. Se-roi shares that he was thinking about how to improve Danbam. Apart from the first month, the business has been in a deficit. Suwa offers to look through his accounts. Se-roi confidently responds that there are no gaps, 25% of sales going to costs, cheaper distribution costs through his connections. He says that the only issue is the high rent. She notes his keen knowledge and asks how he learned all of this. And Se-roi explains that he spent the past 7 years only planning for his business. He admits that he read President Jang's autobiography multiple times and acknowledges that it was very helpful. Suwa says that Itaewon is a difficult place to run a business and asks if Se-roi has considered moving. He responds that he won't move, and Suwa notes that his resolve, hasn't changed at all. Se-roi says that Suwa hasn't changed at all either. Then, Suwa recognizes the customers in Danbam but decides not to out them as minors. Before she leaves, Se-roi asks if she wants to grab a drink afterwards, and she agrees to meet him later. She looks back at the underage students and remembers President Jang's question about which side she'll choose. She dials the number for the police and admits that she's actually changed a lot. Then, Club Hyung orders part-time to get him a bottle of soju. Sungkwan freezes for a moment at the disrespect but swallows his pride as fetches the soju with a smile. Se-roi stops Sungkwan and tells Club Hyung to press the call button instead of making rude demands in banmal. But Club Hyung gets belligerent. He asks if their boss taught them to be rude to customers, and Se-roi turns around to confront him. He says that he's the owner of this bar and has yet to teach his staff that they can behave this way towards obnoxious customers. Provoked by this insult, Club Hyung pushes Gun-soo aside and grabs Se-roi by his hood. Se-roi takes a few steps back so that they're visible to their surveillance camera and dares him to hit him there. Club Hyung throws a punch, but Sungkwan takes the hit after pushing Se-roi to the ground. Sungkwan says that he can tolerate everything except for seeing his Hyung getting hit. Club Hyung thrusts himself forward to hit Sungkwan, but he's knocked unconscious by Sungkwan's punch. Yi-seo looks entertained by the scene. Se-roi recovers from his fall and tries to stop Sungkwan, but Sungkwan flips his boss on the ground. Sungkwan grabs the pot of soup and pours the hot soup on Club Hyung's leg to wake him up. Club Hyung wakes up screaming in pain and apologizes. As punishment, Sungkwan grabs a bottle of soju to hit the rude customer. "Hey, you gangster. It's Hyunhee," and she tells Se-roi that he told him so, that Sungkwan can't break his habits and should be fired. Sungkwan drops the soju bottle and immediately apologizes to Se-roi. Yi-seo laughs and wonders if he's a psychopath. Se-roi tells Hyunhee to call the police, but they've already arrived. Outside, Suwa smokes as she watches the police arrive at Danbam and apologizes, saying that they'll push their date to another time. Se-roi tells the police that they had an altercation with a customer, but the police claim that be here in response to a report of minors entering the bar. Se-roi starts to refute the statement and then looks to Yi-seo with suspicion. Gun-won receives a late-night call from Secretary Kim about his younger brother being held at the police station for entering a bar. At the police station, Sungkwan throws a fit about the 2-month suspension for accepting minors. He blames the students for deceiving them and aggressively defends the bar because the business will go under if they don't open for a week. He knows what Se-roi went through to open this bar. Se-roi stands up. He says that it's not right to yell at the policeman and asks Sungkwan if he really didn't know that the customers were minors. He can see the response in Sungkwan's eyes, so he accepts the penalty. Gun-soo tries to take responsibility for this penalty. The police officer tells him to sit still and wait for his guardian, but Gun-soo yells that he has no guardian. Se-roi tells Gun-soo that he's also being too loud and says that being a minor means that he can't take responsibility. And Yi-seo looks at Se-roi curiously. Then, Gun-won enters the police station. He recognizes Se-roi and laughs when he pieces together the situation. The police officer recognizes him as the Jang GA director, and Gun-won puts his hand on Gun-soo's shoulder, identifying him as Jang GA family. Gun-soo shakes off his brother's hand. Gun-won also adds that Se-roi was a high school classmate. He extends his hand to greet his old friend, and Sungkwan gets up to defend his Hyung from this threat. Gun-won steps in and asks if he should let this one go, and the police officer agrees to this exception. Se-roi closes the police officer's laptop and shares that his dream was to become a police officer. He admits that he couldn't hold in his anger and became a convict, which means he had to give up his dream. He says that police officers need to carry out the law as upright and honorable citizens, and that's what he respected about them. He demands to know why authorities move on Gun-won's command, and says that Gun-won isn't his friend, and asks the police officer to follow the law. Se-roi storms out, and Yi-seo follows him out. Yi-seo stops him in front of the police station and asks why he won't accept Gun-won's help. Se-roi says that he would rather die, and Yi-seo assumes that he won't accept help because of his pride. Se-roi stops and asks why she's starting this argument. She says that as a businessman, he should learn to compromise sometimes. He reciprocates her words from before, to mind her own business since she doesn't know the situation. She acknowledges that she doesn't know anything but suggests that he tolerate help this one time. Se-roi yells that one exception will inevitably lead to more exceptions, and those many one-time exceptions will change a person. Yi-seo rolls her eyes and says that this suspension could end his business. Se-roi says that he can just open his shop again. Gunwon applauds Se-roi and says that the naive Se-roi hasn't changed at all, since he's to blame for Se-roi's prison sentence and high school expulsion. Gunwon laments that Se-roi's misunderstanding about his father's death, and Yi-seo looks alarmed. Gunwon leans into Se-roi's ear and confirms that his suspicions are correct. He laughs, and pitying Se-roi's misfortunes. Se-roi takes off his hood, attempting to control his anger. Gunwon goads him to punch him like he did before, but Se-roi resists an outburst with his clenched fists. Se-roi grabs his wrist and says that he's endured 9 years and plans to endure another 6 years for his statute of limitations to expire. Gunwon looks nervous at this mention, and Se-roi shares that his 15-year plan